Congratulations on your purchase of our Racecraft rks 2.5 SE. Over this video I'm going to be showing you how to put it together with ease and to enhance your racing simulator experience. Alright, so before we get started we're going to lay out everything on a nice even flat surface so we can build on. We're going to be building upside down first. It's a lot easier to build it upside down to make sure everything's nice and level and even, and then we flip it back up and top later on the build. So to get started, grab our two main chassis rails. You're going to be using these 8mm nuts, simply squeezing down on the spring, just like that. Pretty easy to get it down into the extrusion, so from the side. And what we're going to be doing is pre-nut certing the extrusion so we can bolt it up once it's all finished up. So you just want to repeat this simple design here on the other side. Alright, so now that we've done the same for both rails, we can now start off by building from the back. This is your back piece, your 120mm by 40 extrusion, which is 460 long. And what we're going to be doing is just doing the same as what we were doing before, squeezing the nut certs, putting them in on each end. You're going to be putting one in each corner of the extrusion. Okay, so once you've done that, we'll be grabbing our 3 slotted corner piece connectors. And we're going to be grabbing 4 small head bolts and simply not fully tightening, but just enough that it's not moving anywhere, your corner pieces in place. Once we've done this, we're going to head back to the back of the main chassis rail and we're going to be adding 2 120mm plastic end caps to the rear of our main chassis rails. Ready? Alright, so before we move on, we're going to grab our rear bar here and we're going to be adding some more T-nuts to it before we bolt it up. So you want to be grabbing 2 more nut certs and just placing them in the top slot of the extrusion. So when mounting this, we want to have this facing down, so when we flip this back over, we'll be able to mount our seat rails to the top of it. Alright, just before we get to this bit here, we just need to add our 6mm nut certs. We'll be able to install our rubber feet later on. Alright, so now we're going to be moving on to bolting our rear piece together. So you want to grab 4 more small head bolts. And using the nut certs that we placed in earlier, you simply just want to be bolting it straight through with our corner connector here. Okay, so when doing this, make sure you're not tightening it up too tight. We still need to be able to move it around so we can line both pieces up once they're both bolted up. So with both sides lined up, we can now tighten up our rear piece. All you want to be doing is just making sure that your main chassis rails are just in line with your rear chassis bar and tightening each bolt one by one. So now we're going to be moving on to our center support piece, which is the 80/40 extrusion, also 460 long. We want to be basically doing the same thing as we did with our rear piece. So 4 T-nuts, 1 in each corner. Okay, now we can grab our 2 slotted corner piece connectors and bolting it up just the same as we did with the rear support bar. Okay, just before mounting it up, we're just going to add 2 more T-nuts into the top, just like we did with the rear support bar. This is going to be for our seat rails. Flipping it over, brackets facing the rear of the rig, and simply just placing it right down there. Should fit nice and snug in there. Yep, and same as before, we're just going to be bolting it up together. Okay, so before we get to tightening our center support bar, we want to be measuring it up so when we add our seat support bars on the front, everything will be in line. So you still want to have this a little bit tight so we can move it around, but you want to be grabbing 2 of your 460 40/40 bars here. These are going to be our seat bars on top of the rig. So we want to pre-nutsert these once again and then add plastic end caps. Alright, so before we move on, we're just going to be grabbing our pre-nutserted seat rails and placing it on top of our extrusion here. And you just want to be lining up the front of your center bar with the end of the plastic end caps. This ensures that we have enough space in between our 2 pieces of extrusion to place our seat brackets on top when we flip it over. Alright, so with that now tightened down and in place, we can now flip our rig back into its normal position and we can now start mounting up our seat bars. Alright, so as we were, we're going to grab our pre-nutserted seat bars. We're going to be grabbing 4 single piece corner brackets. And we're just going to be bolting these down once again with our small head bolts. Not too tight so we can still move it across. Alright, so with those mounted up and in place, we're now going to be bolting down our seat bars to the top of our rig. So usually we line it up just with the edge of the extrusion here, but this may depend on the type of seat that you have and what mounting brackets that you have coming with it. Once again, just bolting down with our small head bolts. Right, now moving on to the front, let's pre-nutsert our extrusion to fit our pedal deck. Good save.
Good save, Wilson.
What can I say, Christopher? Alright, now moving on to constructing our pedal deck, you want to be grabbing your other 2 pieces of 40/40, that's 460 long, and we're going to be pre-nutserting this once again to be able to bolt up to our pedal plate. Alright, so next up we're going to be bolting up our extrusion to our pedal plate piece. You want to be grabbing our larger headed M8 by 20 bolts and simply bolting it up. Alright, so our next step would just be bolting these plates here straight to where we put our nutserts earlier. So once again, using our larger headed M8 by 20 bolts, just bolt these in. Alright, next step's pretty easy. It's just as simple as putting our pedal deck on the top, lining up with our nuts and just bolting it up once again with our large head M8 by 20s. Alright, so next up we're once again going to be nutserting our extrusion to mount our uprights and for whichever side you choose to have your shifter bar and your shifter bar bolts as well. Alright, so next we're going to be preparing our wheel uprights. So once again, just inserting our extrusion into the side. Now we're going to grab our 3 slotted corner piece and just placing that on the top too. Once again, keep this a little bit loose so you have room to move it around when installing. Alright, so next up we can mount our uprights to the side of our chassis. So lengthwise you basically want it just in line with the back of your pedal deck, or roughly about 260-270 centimeters. So same as before, just lining up with our nuts, and with our small head screws we're just going to be bolting it straight in. After that's all bolted up, we're going to be pre-nutserting our nuts to install our wheel deck. Alright, so next up, to install our wheel deck we have to flip the rig on its side. Okay, so to install our wheel deck, pretty simple. Place it in between the gap. And just as before, using our larger head M8 by 20 bolts, lining up your nuts and bolting it up. Okay, once you've bolted your wheel deck up in place, simply place plastic end caps on the top. Alright, while the rig is on its side, it's another opportunity to place our rubber feet on. So grab your M6 by 25 bolts, pretty plain simple, and just bolting it straight up. Alright, so just a note from before, depending on what side you are going to be adding your shifter bar onto, you just want to be adding an extra 2 8mm nutserts onto the back of your steering upright on whatever side you're going to be placing your shifter bar on. Alright, so the last piece of our puzzle is putting together our shifter bar. So, same as before, just going to be putting in our nutserts beforehand. So you want to be adding a plastic end cap to the piece where you put 2 nuts. This is going to be where your bar comes down like this. Same with this. Alright, so to connect these 2 pieces together, grab your single connector here. Alright, so lastly we're going to be adding the rest of our single connectors. We're going to be adding one on each side of your 80-40 bar and one on each side of your 40-40 bar. So when flipped up the other way, bolt straight to the side of your extrusion and to the top part of your wheel mount. Our last piece is pretty simple, just bolting it up with our pre-existing nuts. There you have it, your brand new RKS 2.5 SE from Racecraft Simulations.
Good job, Julesy.